Vertical urban agriculture, creating space for growth in an overgrown society. During my research for this presentation, I came across an editorial published in the Saturday Evening Post in 1958, commending Ottawa on its plan to reserve a so-called green belt around the city in order to protect and preserve the agricultural lands from looming urban sprawl. The writer noted that soon entire sections of the U.S. could become a megalopolis with, quote, no open spaces between Philadelphia and New York and Hartford. This probably sounded a little far-fetched at the time. However, we have seen growth which almost makes that statement true. The human population has more than doubled since that article was published and is expected to continue to grow at an alarming rate. Not only that, but in 2009, the urban population surpassed the rural population for the first time in history. As cities expand with this growth, surrounding arable land is sacrificed to housing, shopping, and infrastructure. One up-and-coming solution to the problem of losing land is vertical urban agriculture. Urban agriculture, and particularly the indoor vertical kind, presents urban access to local food using minimal land, minimal water, and minimal transportation. Herbicides and pesticides are also kept at a minimum because the plants are not exposed to the elements and airborne pests and diseases. The shelter provided also takes away the seasonal limitations of crops, which can drive up prices at times of year when crops are out of season. There are, of course, challenges that arise when trying to implement such a progressive design. First of all, the startup cost could be tremendous. Buying or building a multi-story building within city limits can cost a fortune because of land values and, of course, codes and permits. Also, indoor agricultural facilities require particular and extensive hydroponic systems for water delivery and recycling, as well as special lighting and gas systems. However, if large companies or governments became involved, the price would be minimal compared with the positive outcomes, like conserving our water, conserving our land, and not having to import foods. When I think of urban agriculture in cities like New York or Seattle, you envision rooftop gardens where apartment dwellers go to relax and get away from the city life, or artistic wall gardens like the one pictured here, which bring natural beauty to otherwise concrete areas. I see vertical farms as ultra-modern buildings with robust plants visible through every clean glass pane. However, the general term urban agriculture is not always greeted with such visions. In developing countries, urban agriculture can slow the modernization of urban areas, and some say keep its people in perpetual poverty. In impoverished cities, urban agriculture is used out of necessity when people are unable to find work and provide their families with food. Valuable city land is used to keep goats and grow food, and in the meantime, the city becomes what is referred to in one article as a peasant city. Areas can become polluted as a result of the farming practices, and land can begin to deteriorate. I mention this because it is good to keep in mind that while urban farming in established and affluent developed countries presents many opportunities and positive outcomes, it might not be appropriate for developing countries to implement agriculture in their city limits until things become more established and stable. It has been proven that urban agriculture in developing countries does not improve the GDP at all. In the right situation, the positive outcomes are virtually endless. Produce would be safe from environmental damage in any place in the world, such as wind, hail, unseasonable freezes, since it would be in an indoor controlled habitat. This would also allow for plants to be grown year-round and not be limited by climate-induced limitations, meaning seasons. It would also be easier to keep plants pest-free by having them in an almost quarantine situation, enclosed from the world around them. This would mean that there would be very little need for herbicides and pesticides, reducing the amount of pollutants being washed into our water, and also reducing the amount of chemicals in and on our fresh produce being brought into our homes. Going back to the seasonal limitations, you can see in this visual that we have fruits and vegetables that generally would be grown in different parts of the country or world and grown at different seasons. They can actually all be grown and harvested essentially at the same time in one of these indoor controlled habitats. As well as avoiding pests during the growing of produce, having an abundant source of produce grown locally would cut down on the need for imported food. In this way, we could avoid importing pests and diseases on our food from other parts of the world, which has been known to happen in the past and has happened quite recently. Locally grown food also results in a significant decrease in the need for transportation of food. By reducing shipping by boat, plane, train, and automobile, we reduce the use of fuel and the emission of pollutants. The reduction in need for transportation also means the consumer wouldn't see the transportation costs trickling down into the cost of their food. Access to fresh food can be a huge problem, especially in urban areas. Many areas in cities, which tend to be low-income areas, are in what is sometimes referred to as a food desert. Many people can't even get low-fat milk or high-fiber bread due to a lack of grocery stores that sell fresh produce. They're generally limited to convenience stores. It could be 10 miles to get to the nearest grocery store. The lack of access to good food has been linked to obesity and diabetes. Studies have shown that simply having access to healthy foods like fresh produce is linked to lowered risk of obesity and other diet-related diseases. Safe food were grown within city limits closer to these areas, and markets or stores to distribute this food were introduced to these areas. It could not only improve the health of residents, but it could also boost the economy by providing job opportunities for people living in those areas. The last big improvement that vertical farming presents that I will discuss today, and this is also perhaps the most dramatic difference between traditional agriculture and vertical farming, is the conservation of water. Some designers of vertical farm facilities say that it uses 95% less water than traditional farming. You can see in the sketch here a very basic idea of what's going on in a vertical farm situation. Water is generally pumped up from a reservoir at the bottom of the building to the top, and then it trickles down from level to level, watering all of the plants. The nutrients watch down from level to level and are beneficial to plants on the lower levels instead of just being washed off as they would be in traditional farming. The wastewater produced by humans manning the building can even be filtered in an underground filtering area using wetland plants as filters. The filtered water then goes to a tank where microorganisms can break down the waste and create nutrients for the plants, which can be pumped back into the building's hydroponic system and used all over again. As you can see, in this enclosed system, very little water goes to waste, whereas with traditional farming, water is generally just washed off, and sometimes it takes land with it, deteriorating the land. Vertical farming provides a solution for a world which is losing arable land due to urban sprawl. It can also be used in areas where there are geographical limitations to traditional agriculture, like unusable soil and land or harsh climates. People living on islands paying crazy inflated prices because of transportation costs could experience a huge break if food were produced locally. It's an excellent way to conserve land by growing up and growing locally. Thank you for listening today.